After witnessing my boss drop me off following a work party, he accused me of infidelity and filed for divorce. I read it. I must admit that I'm not sure I should write this at all. I am aware of how the internet operates. Individuals will read this, scrutinize every aspect, and disparage me in a variety of ways. I understand, I promise. I can't stop mentally reliving everything, but I deserve some of that. I'm stuck in this never-ending cycle of remorse, guilt, and bewilderment, and I'm at a loss on what to do. Perhaps sharing this would help me understand everything. I just can't figure it out on my own. So perhaps someone will read this and provide me with some clarification or direction. For reference, here is a brief history. My husband's name is Rai. Rai and I have been married for around 3 years, and we are both in our late 20s, 29, to be precise. At first, everything appeared to be ideal. That's how it always begins, isn't it? I will no longer sit here and pretend that Rai is not a wonderful person. He is honest, trustworthy, kind, and hardworking, everything a person might want in a spouse. For a while, I believed that we were destined to be together because he gave me a sense of security and affection that I had never experienced before. However, things started to shift with time. I believe that most people in long-term relationships understand what I mean, even though it's difficult to pinpoint how or when it began. Nothing dramatic or large-scale occurred. There was no significant betrayal or violent altercation. It was simply ennui, the kind that comes so gradually that you don't initially realize it. Suddenly, without knowing how it happened, you look at the person lying next to you and feel as though a stranger has replaced them. One day, you're laughing together, telling each other inside jokes, and envisioning growing old together. It happened gradually for Rai and me. I have loved Rai for years since he is really stable. When times were hard, he was my pillar of support and steady hand. However, that same stability eventually started to feel too familiar and predictable. And even though that would seem like a good thing, I started to feel the effects. He didn't change, so it's not like he did anything wrong. Perhaps I did, once reassuring. His consistency began to feel oppressive. I felt as though I was living my life in a state of sleepwalking, and I was in dire need of awakening. I realize now how self-centered that sounds. It's the truth, even though I detest admitting it to myself. Much less posting it here for public consumption. I desired thrills. I desired someone or something that would restore my sense of vitality. The messiness began at this point, all of a sudden, and not in a professional sense. My employer at work began to take note. Initially, it was modest. Simply small gestures here and there, like a comment on my job, an extra grin when we met, or a query about my weekend that seemed a bit too intimate to be strictly professional. Then it escalated in ways that were difficult to overlook. Ted stayed a bit too long during our conversation. He would have this expression on his face while he stared at me, and the way he laughed was so absurd. My goodness. Things that weren't even remotely hilarious would make him laugh. He would laugh at my jokes as if they were the funniest thing he had ever heard. Even though I knew they were terrible, I dismissed it at first. He was simply being friendly. After all, that was my self-talk. Ultimately, I believed that I had enough experience in the workplace to distinguish between benign remarks and something more. Furthermore, it's not as though I wasn't accustomed to receiving attention from males in the past. Even when Rai and I were dating, we would occasionally exchange glances and engage in courteous flirtation at social gatherings. It didn't signify anything, and it wasn't serious either. However, there was something odd about the way my boss regarded me. That kind of lingering attention got me thinking, was there more to what he was saying than he was revealing? It meant nothing, I told myself. After all, he hadn't behaved in this manner in the 2 months that I had been working here. Wouldn't he have already demonstrated his intentions if he had any other plans than to be my boss? All of this must have been a product of my hyperactive imagination, a result of the monotony of my existence with Rai. Nevertheless, I was unable to shake the sensation. To be perfectly honest, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the way he regarded me as if I were more than Rai's wife or the person who handled scheduling and invoice filing, or even just a name on the payroll. I felt noticed for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. It was more than simply his attention. It was the way it made me feel important, intriguing, and like I had something noteworthy about me. Something inside of me that I was unaware had been dormant was awakened by it. I had forgotten what it was like to be wanted and noticed. It was exhilarating. Despite the fact that nothing had happened and I had promised myself nothing would, I began to look forward to going to work. I told myself that I was reading too much into his gestures, and that I was overanalyzing the situation, even though I made an effort to ignore it. I couldn't help but get a little excited whenever I saw him staring at me as if I were the most interesting person in the room. The fact that I didn't feel invisible for the first time in a long time both delighted and frightened me. It didn't help that he was charming, self-assured, and naturally charismatic. Everything I wasn't. Everyone seemed to be drawn to him by his magnetic energy, but I had the impression that all of that was saved for me. It seemed as though the outside world vanished when he spoke to me. He had the ability to make you feel as though you were the only thing that mattered at that particular moment and the most significant person in the room. I really liked it, and before I knew it, I began to look forward to our talks. I had far more conversations than I should have. I would find myself merely anticipating the times when we would cross paths at the coffee maker, or when he would visit my desk to see how I was doing. My pulse would accelerate, my heart would beat a little quicker, and I would experience that thrill of excitement I hadn't had in years. Naturally, I assured myself that it was all innocuous because nothing had actually occurred. Some eye contact, a few compliments, and perhaps a touch that lingered for just a split second too long. But that was about it. There had been no crossings of lines. Surely I wasn't doing anything wrong, however. Neither he nor the attention he was giving me was the true issue. What had awoken in me was the true issue. I became more conscious of my appearance than I had been in years. It seemed subtle at first. It was just about regaining some of the confidence I thought I had lost, and feeling good about myself. I told myself, however, I felt in my heart that I was deceiving myself. I started putting on makeup for an additional 10, 15, or even 20 minutes in the morning while I struggled to decide what to wear. Would he notice this blouse? Was this skirt the perfect fit for my body, even though I hadn't worn heels in years? I started wearing them again. It wasn't for Rai, and it wasn't for me either. I was aware of who I wanted to win over. I felt bad about it. But I couldn't help but get a tiny rush when I saw him staring at me or when he said something nice about my attire. It was intoxicating and gave me a sense of aliveness that I hadn't experienced in a long time. Then everything got out of hand. We struck up a conversation outside of work. Initially, it was merely lighthearted messages, a brief just about an incident that occurred throughout the day, or a link to a humorous meme, but that didn't last. Before long, we were texting each other every day. Every single day. We were engaging in meaningful, in-depth talks rather than merely chit-chatting. I was opening up to him in ways I hadn't done with Ryan years as he shared his dreams, hardships, and past with me. He seemed to understand me in a way that no one else could. It was only two people conversing, so it was still harmless. I reminded myself, that's what friends are for. I began telling Rai small falsehoods at first, such as why I was grinning at my phone, why I was staying late at work, and why I appeared preoccupied at dinner. He didn't ask me many questions, perhaps to a fault. Rai was trusting. Perhaps it was made worse by the fact that he never pressed for answers or pride. As my guilt was insufficient to stop me, it became instinctive for me to keep lying to him. In all honesty, he never pressed for clarification, asked why I appeared aloof, or asked why I was suddenly constantly on my phone. Perhaps that contributed to the issue. He had too much faith in me. In a way I cannot quite describe, his trust felt oppressive, like a burden I had to bear even though I knew deep down that I didn't deserve it. Little white lies were initially used to hide an occasional text or phone call, but as time went on, the lies became more complex. The lies also did. I was making up whole tales to explain why I was staying late at work, or why I suddenly had commitments on the weekends, rather than just rationalizing away random stuff. What was the reason behind my plans? Because we had begun to hang together outside of work and were no longer merely messaging or conversing. It was simple at first, getting coffee after work and bumping into each other at lunch locations close to the office. However, even I was aware of the thin pretense. These were not haphazard, innocent interactions. Rather, they were purposeful and planned, and I was as involved as he was. It felt like we were approaching that line, even though we hadn't crossed it yet. In every way possible, it was an emotional affair. He was the last person I texted before turning in for the night, and the first person I messaged in the morning. He was aware of details about me that Rai was no longer aware of. He was aware of my feelings over my work, my marriage, and the tedium that had infiltrated my life like a nighttime robber. He also paid attention. He gave me a sense of being seen, heard, and valued. It had an addicting quality. I realized that. All of this sounds foolish, but I simply cannot deny how I felt. Indeed, there was a tiny, obstinate aspect of myself that I kept suppressing. I couldn't let go completely. I couldn't move one last step into the area I knew I couldn't return to. Why, therefore, I was afraid. I feared what it would signify and what it would say about me as a wife and as a person. I wasn't prepared for Rai, myself, or anybody else to judge me in that way. There was also the guilt. Even if I attempted to repress it, it was still there. It was like a kick to the gut every time I saw Rai sitting on the couch, blindly believing this was not fair to him. I was aware of that, in his own subtle, dependable manner. I knew he loved me. I convinced myself that it wasn't really cheating and that I wasn't doing anything wrong. As long as we didn't go over the physical boundary, however, I knew in my heart that was also a lie. There was also the work party. They weren't often at our office, but when they were usually these grand, upscale events with open drinks, pricey settings, and plenty of opportunities to have fun. The latest one was no exception. I had been driven there by Rai, but he had not accompanied me inside. I knew it wasn't his scene, so I didn't even try to persuade him to come. He disliked socializing in general and gatherings in particular, especially with my coworkers. I went by myself, and to be honest, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. In the throng, giggling, reviving a sense of life, I knew it wasn't fair to Rai, but I hadn't understood how oppressive it had been for me to be confined to this repetitive, predictable routine. However, I was unable to get rid of those feelings. I felt wanted at the party. It was wonderful to feel seen as the evening went on. I drank a few drinks, nothing too much, just enough to give me a slight buzz and a slight lightheadedness. And I assumed Rai, as it grew late, I was most likely already sleeping or at least in bed. I accepted my boss's offer of a ride home without hesitation because I didn't want to wake him up and disrupt his tranquility. At the time, it appeared to be harmless. There was nothing odd about the fact that he had already given me a ride home a few weeks prior. It was only a ride after all, so I agreed. In the car, we engaged in small talk. The type of conversation that occurs when you're intoxicated and everything seems a bit more laid back and transparent. I wasn't really anxious, however. He stopped the car, turned to face me, and requested a kiss as soon as we drove up outside our house. I wasn't completely sober. My inhibitions had been lowered by the drink, and I wasn't really thinking clearly, but he drew my attention. I had never told myself that before, but I felt it then. So I leaned in rather than resisted. I gave him a kiss, at least that's what I told myself, and it was just that. I assumed Rai was sleeping. I assumed he wouldn't see it, that he wouldn't have noticed. I waved farewell, thanked my boss, smiled, and went inside. I thought that would have been the end of it. Nothing more than another night and another commute home. Naturally, though, it wasn't. When I went in, Rai was already waiting for me. I saw him sitting in the living room, staring at the door as though he had been there for hours. He inquired as to who had dropped me off as soon as I entered. I was taken aback by the strength of his voice. It exceeded my expectations. I went cold. There was no simple way to deny it, no matter how hard I tried to hide it or justify it. I'd lied to him before, but this time was different from the others. For the first time, I wasn't sure I could lie my way out of it as his eyes searched mine for the truth. I explained to him that I had had too much to drink and didn't want to bother him, so my boss had offered to drive me home. I attempted to make it seem innocuous and informal, but Rai's astonishment was evident. He didn't believe it. I was gasping for air when he accused me of cheating. I was unsure of how to react. He claimed to have witnessed me kissing my boss. I was absolutely taken aback. My mind raced to come up with a defense, but nothing came. Panic set in. How could I justify something that I knew was bad in my heart? Although I hadn't made it all the way or crossed the last line, I had crossed a lot of others. Fire was finally catching up to me after I had been playing with it for so long. The late hours at work, the texts I was receiving from my employer, the way I appeared aloof, and the way I had distanced myself from him over the past few months, were all things Rai began to enumerate, and none of it was something I could refute. He was right about everything, so he wasn't wrong at all. I had been unique, emotionally, psychologically, and even physically. I had been sliding away. The altercation swiftly intensified. He eventually told me he wanted a divorce after saying things that were irrevocable. I pleaded with him to change his mind. I informed him that it was. I could tell by the look in his eyes that he didn't. Trust me, even if he believed nothing had happened, how could he, really? I had provided him with every cause to be suspicious of me, little by little. I had ruined that foundation until only falsehoods remained. Rai initially declared that he was leaving, but he changed his mind and explained that since he wasn't the one who had cheated, it didn't make sense to leave his home. He informed me I had to go after packing my belongings in the morning. I pleaded, sobbed, and freaked out, but he ignored me. He was chilly, aloof, and firm. I followed his instructions to leave. I sobbed as I headed to my parents' house. It was understandable that my folks were upset with me. How I could do this to someone who loved me was beyond their comprehension. The journey to work is terrible, and their home is far away. It feels like a punishment every day. I keep asking myself if I'm deserving of it. He still refuses to speak to me after a week. I can't even explain it to him. I'm at a loss on what to do. I'm not sure how to make Rai better. Update. Hi Reddit, I've returned. I knew in my heart that sharing my story here would expose me to a lot of criticism, but you people are very good at giving it out. Yes, I understand after reading all of the comments, I'm worthy of the criticism. I'm not attempting to shift the burden here, and I never attempted to present myself as a saint. I realize now how foolish some of my decisions were. I realize now how serious what I did was. However, I find it incomprehensible that no matter what I try, this scenario seems to be slipping through my fingers. I understand. I had strong feelings for my boss. It was an error. I said that I went too far and that I shouldn't have let things get that bad. Although I didn't have sex with him, I violated my spouse and made terrible choices that brought me there emotionally. I truly understand Rai's anger. I've apologized, though. I've pleaded. I've tried every possible solution to put things right, but he doesn't seem to be listening. Rai simply refuses to listen. He cuts me off every time I try to speak with him. Every time I try to express my sincere regret and how much I regret everything, he gets even more distant. He's very clear that he wants a divorce. He claims that I'm no longer welcome in his home and that he doesn't want me back. I feel like he doesn't really care about me anymore. Even though he told me I could remove my belongings whenever it was convenient, I'm worn out. I'm simply exhausted. I've been crying all the time. Every stride forward feels like 2 steps back, even though I've been working to put everything back together. How could my work go so badly? My personal life is in disarray and permeating every aspect of my life. I'm emotionally and psychologically worn out. I'm making an effort to concentrate at work, but my thoughts keep returning to Rai and the mess I made. I've fallen into a dark pit that I can't seem to escape, and to make matters worse, he won't even allow anyone to speak to him, not even my parents have made an effort to step in and show him that I truly apologize for the grave error I committed. He won't even, though. He's finished with me. Even worse, I can't get in touch with his family. I feel like I'm the only one dealing with this. I feel like I can't stop it, no matter what I do, and I'm losing him and everything. Even our mutual friends have taken sides. They believe that I cheated. They believe I'm just a cheater who slept around since I kissed my employer. They believe that I deceived Rai, and in their opinion, I did, even though nothing physical occurred. They simply perceive me as the bad guy, and they don't give a damn about why. The HR meeting comes next, as if things couldn't get any worse. I'm not even positive what it's about, but I suspect it has something to do with myself and my boss. I'm afraid. It feels like the final nail in the coffin after everything that has happened. But I have no idea what they will say or do. All I want to do is fix this. Rai doesn't want to try to mend our differences, even if I want to. I feel as though I'm about to drown. It seems like every time I try to make things better, he gets farther away. I'm completely lost and perplexed. How can I resolve this? How can I demonstrate my sincere contrition for my actions? I feel like I'm standing here watching everything fall apart as each door closes. I'm in need of assistance, but I'm not even sure where to look. Should I stop attempting to make amends with him? Do I have to come to terms with the fact that he is done with me? What should I do if he is unwilling to resolve things? Even though I don't want to, I'm simply exhausted. I need some direction. Update, please. It has been a long time, Reddit. For a while now, I've really wanted to give you an update, but I kept typing it out and then deleting it. I suppose I was ashamed. I didn't want to acknowledge that many of you likely anticipated this. But here I am. Let's get started because I have a lot to unload. The divorce comes first. It's done. It's still too raw, and to be honest, I'm not sure if I have the emotional stamina for it at the moment. So I really don't want to get into the specifics. It is painful, as in physically painful, you know. I never thought that I would be the one to file for divorce. I feel like I've been drowning in this for ages. Even though it all seems to have happened too quickly, I'll only state that I received neither spousal support nor any money. Naturally, I wasn't shocked by it. Why would Rai lend me money when he didn't want anything to do with me? I understand that I am to blame. No matter how hard I try to understand that my actions, my affair, and my faults caused this mess, it doesn't make the agony go away. I thought I had everything I could ever want 1 minute, and then it was all gone the next. I never imagined that I would be here now. Regarding my former boss, I fulfilled my promise. I made contact with his wife. I knew she should know, even if I wasn't sure if it was worth it. We didn't share a bed, but that didn't alter the fact that we had a passionate relationship. To be honest, I felt compelled to be honest. I messaged her on Instagram, gave her the rundown, and attached all the supporting documentation. I was honest with her about what had transpired. Nothing would change, in my opinion. To be honest, I didn't think she would leave him, but perhaps she would become upset and they would dispute, but I did all I could. It turns out that she blocked me right away. My boss's secretary, a co-worker, made a move on me when I was at my lowest, so I no longer speak to her. They had been arguing, she told me. That's the latest on that. I'm not sure what transpired after that. I'm trapped myself. I haven't even left the house yet. I don't even know what to do with myself because my mental health has gotten that awful. I'm no longer searching for a normal job. I've been attempting full-time freelancing, but it's challenging. It's really difficult. I'm barely making ends meet in this difficult market, but I'm managing to make it work somehow. I'm now hopeful that things will get easier and my portfolio will expand over time. The majority of my time has been spent at my parents' residence. They offered me a place to live for free for as long as I promised to look after them. When they were old, they claimed that I only needed to look after them and not do anything else. If I consented, they also promised me a sizable fortune. I suppose they're looking at me as the one who can do it because I'm the only child. I informed them that I needed time to reflect. To be honest, I'm not sure if I'm capable of it. I'm unsure if I want to. It seems like a trap to spend my entire life caring for them. But I also feel like I have a duty to do so. However, it's not like I can back out once I accept because I'm not sure whether they want me to sign a contract. The part that still hurts comes next. Rai is still with my parents, who have been there for me through everything. In addition to talking about how wonderful his new girlfriend is and inviting him to Thanksgiving, my dad occasionally goes fishing with him. It hurts so much that they continue to discuss him as if nothing had occurred. I informed them that if they invited him over again, I would not be having dinner with them. I simply cannot watch him at my dining table with his new girlfriend. Simply put, it would be excessive. Alright, so I'm alone there. I no longer actually communicate with my buddies. None of them chose me. They all chose their sides. It's solitary. I'm at a loss on what to do. All I'm doing is attempting to survive each day. I'm not sure if this is my life for now or if I'll ever be alright again. That's my update though. I appreciate you reading. I appreciate everyone who took the time to DM me and check in. To be honest, I realize that I am solely to blame for the chaos in my life at the moment. I realize I made a mistake. The repercussions of my actions have been weighing heavily on me as I sit here. Believe me, I understand. Being attacked online is a part of the. I knew what I was getting myself into when I shared my blunders on a site like this, but it still hurts. You know, I don't need reminders every time I use this app. I know I made a mistake. I do, however, want to express my gratitude to those of you who did not immediately pass judgment and instead took the time to check in, send a note, or otherwise demonstrate compassion. You probably don't realize how much it means. So, thank you for what it's worth.